I know you were mostly supporting Alex, but I have to say it is great to be on a crowded court. I've played this tournament for many years, and to see the stadium full, it means a lot. And also, like to thank Alex for bringing a new demographic to the sport. I really appreciate
Coco Gauff just won her match against Eala. The crowd was against her the whole time. And what did she do right after? She grabbed the mic and said something that nobody expected. Something that shut down every single person who has been talking negatively about Eala and her fans. This one is worth watching to the very end. Here's the question before we get into it. Why do you think some people in the tennis world are so uncomfortable with Filipino fans showing up and showing out? Tell us exactly what you think in the comments.
Coco, that was clinical from start to finish. I know you weren't quite pleased with your level yesterday. I'm sure you feel differently about it today.
Yeah, it was a bit better today. I could have served a little bit better, but I made it in when it mattered. And yeah, Alex is a tough competitor. And even when I was up, I knew that she can come back at any given moment. I've seen her do it before. So yeah, thank you guys for coming out here. And I know you were mostly supporting. I know you were mostly supporting Alex, but I have to say it is great to be on a crowd.
Let's set the scene properly because context matters here, and the full picture is way more interesting than just the headline. It is the Dubai Tennis Championships 2026. Eala, the 20-year-old Filipina tennis player who has been turning the sport upside down for the past year, has just made it to the quarterfinals. That alone is a statement. This is a WTA 1000 event. These are some of the best players on the planet. And Aya, who was not even in the top 100 a year ago, is here competing at this level and winning matches that people said she had no business winning. Her opponent in the quarterfinal is Coco Gauff, world number 2, US Open champion, one of the biggest names in women's tennis right now. On paper, this should be a straightforward match. And result-wise, it was. Gauff won 6-0, 6-2. Dominant, clinical, no argument there. But here is what the scoreline does not tell you. The entire stadium, packed, loud, electric, was cheering for EA from the first point to the last. Let's go, Alex. Echoing around the Aviation Club Tennis Center. Filipino flags. Filipino fans who flew in, or drove in, or showed up any way they could just to be in that building while their girl played. The noise was so loud you could apparently hear it from the hotel. The hotel. Not courtside, not the stands, the hotel. And Coco Gauff, who had just beaten her opponent 6-0, 6-2 with the entire crowd rooting against her, walked up to the microphone for her post-match on-court interview and said something that made a lot of people stop scrolling.
I think it's great. I know sometimes it's tough when you're playing against a home crowd, but I think that it's great for the sport. So keep being enthusiastic and keep rooting for your player. Yeah.
I know you were mostly supporting Alex, but I have to say it is great to be on a crowded court. I've played this tournament for many years, and to see the stadium full, it means a lot. Read that again slowly. Coco Gauff, the woman who just dominated that match while thousands of fans chanted her opponent's name, opened her victory speech by thanking the crowd. Not her crowd, Alex's crowd. She stood there, winner's microphone in hand, and chose gratitude over ego. She chose to acknowledge what was happening in that stadium instead of brushing it off or making a passive-aggressive comment about the noise level. That is not nothing. That is actually a big deal. And it gets better, because Gauff did not stop at being polite. She went further. She looked at what was happening around Eala. The packed stadiums, the passionate fan bases, the Filipino communities showing up in Dubai, in Melbourne, in Miami, and she connected the dots out loud. I'd like to thank Alex for bringing a new demographic to the sport. I really appreciate it. I think it's great she thanked her. She actually thanked EA for what she is doing for tennis. Not in a backhanded way. Not with that smile people do when they are being polite, but secretly annoyed. Gauff said it with genuine appreciation, genuine recognition that what Eala is building goes beyond personal achievement. It is changing who shows up to tennis. It is changing whose faces you see in the crowd. It is changing what communities feel like they belong in this sport. And that right there is the thing that some people in the tennis world cannot seem to handle. Because let's be real about what has been happening in the background of all this. While Djokovic, Pegula, and Anisimova have been celebrating Eala's rise and the energy her fans bring, there has been a very different conversation happening in other corners of the tennis community. A conversation about Filipino fans being too loud, too disruptive, too intense for a sport that has always had a very particular idea of what the right kind of fan looks like and sounds like. Now, nobody is standing up on a podium and saying the quiet part loud. Nobody is putting it in those exact words, but the subtext is not exactly hidden either. When people complain about Eala's fans being rowdy or overwhelming or polarizing, and yes, that word polarizing has been used, they're not talking about behavior that would get anyone ejected from a venue. They are talking about passion. They are talking about noise. They're talking about people who come from a culture where you show up for your person with everything you have loudly and proudly, and you do not apologize for it, and that is making certain people in tennis uncomfortable. People who are used to a sport where the loudest thing in the stadium is the umpire calling the score. Gauff's response to all of that essentially get over it. Not in those words, but in the way she chose to frame what Filipino fans are doing for tennis. She made it clear that their presence is not a problem to be managed. It is an asset. It is growth. It is exactly what the sport needs. I know sometimes it's tough when you are playing against a home crowd, but I think that it's great for the sport. So, keep being enthusiastic and keep rooting for your player. Keep being enthusiastic. Not please calm down. Not there are appropriate ways to support your player. Keep being enthusiastic. That is Coco Gauff, one of the most prominent voices in women's tennis right now, directly pushing back against anyone who has been trying to tone down the Filipino fan base. And she did it from a winner's microphone moments after winning the match. There is a specific kind of confidence in that. And then she capped it off with what is honestly one of the best quotes to come out of any post-match interview this season. Whenever you guys were cheering for Alex, I was pretending that it was my name. And I think that it helped me a lot. If you can't beat them, you've got to join them. That is not just funny. That is Gauff refusing to be a victim of the atmosphere. That is her taking the energy that was not meant for her and using it to fuel her own performance. And the fact that she said that out loud with a laugh in front of those same fans shows exactly the kind of player and person she is. No resentment, no bitterness, just respect and a solid sense of humor. Now, let's zoom out a little because Gauff's comments in Dubai did not happen in a vacuum. This is part of a much bigger conversation that has been building since Eala first exploded onto the scene at the Miami Open in 2025. That was the tournament where everything changed. Eala went on a run that nobody saw coming, beating Grand Slam champions Jelena Ostapenko, Madison Keys, and the then world number 1 Iga back-to-back. 3 Grand Slam winners gone at the hands of a 19-year-old from the Philippines who most casual tennis fans had never heard of before that week. Pegula stopped her in the semi-final. But Eala had already made her point. And from that moment, the Filipino fan base that had been following her quietly started showing up everywhere, loudly, visibly, unmissably. By the time the Australian Open rolled around in January 2026, the numbers were undeniable. The first Monday session set an all-time attendance record 68,687 people. The previous record was 59,621. And a significant part of that surge was driven by Filipino fans showing up for Eala's main draw debut. She was placed on court 6, which promptly became the most chaotic, most packed, most electric court in the entire tournament that day. Overflow everywhere, flags everywhere, noise that did not belong on court 6 because court 6 was never supposed to hold this kind of moment. The organizers put her on the wrong court. That was the actual mistake. And Djokovic said it plainly. You could argue that it was maybe a poor schedule and maybe they could schedule her on a bigger court. He then went on to call the whole situation a good problem to have, pointing out that the real problem would be empty stands, not full ones. The man with 24 Grand Slams looked at everything happening around Eala and saw growth for the sport. Not a disruption, growth. So you have Djokovic saying it is great. You have Gauff saying it is great. You have Eala, who lost her own home crowd advantage to Eala's fans in Miami and still called the situation incredible, saying it is great. You have Anisimova saying is a good representation of her country. The consensus among the people who are actually on tour, who are actually in these stadiums, who are actually experiencing the Eala effect firsthand, is overwhelmingly positive, which makes you wonder who exactly is on the other side of this conversation. Who are the people describing Filipino fans as polarizing? Who are the people treating passionate support as a breach of tennis etiquette? Because it is clearly not the players. It is not the ones who actually have to compete in those environments. They have all said publicly and without hesitation that they love what Eala is doing for the sport. So the discomfort is coming from somewhere else, from people who have a very fixed idea of what tennis is supposed to look like and who it is supposed to belong to. People who are fine with a sport that has struggled with attendance and diversity and global reach as long as it stays familiar, as long as it stays quiet, as long as it stays theirs. And then Eala shows up and suddenly the courts are full and loud and waving Philippine flags, and the sport is reaching communities it never reached before. And instead of celebrating that, some people decided the problem was the Filipinos. That is what Gauff was pushing back against. Maybe not in those exact words. Maybe not with that level of directness. But when she stood at that microphone and thanked EA for bringing a new demographic to the sport, she was making a statement. She was saying these fans belong here. This energy belongs here. This is what progress looks like, and you should be grateful for it, not threatened by it. Herself, for what it is worth, has handled everything around her rise with a maturity that is hard to find in players twice her age. She talked after the Australian Open about compartmentalizing, about not thinking during a match about what her presence means for the Philippines. Because during the match, the only thing that matters is the next point. And then after, when she walks off and feels the love from those crowds, she lets herself feel it. She reflects. She recognizes how far she has come. That is someone who knows exactly what she is carrying and chooses to carry it well. No complaints, no meltdowns, no drama, just tennis and grace and a fan base that would honestly run through a wall for her. The people criticizing that fan base should probably spend a little more time thinking about why tennis needed them in the first place, and a little less time complaining that they showed up. Coco Gauff did not just win a match in Dubai. She made a point that the entire tennis world needed to hear, and she did it with class, humor, and zero tolerance for the hate. If you are here for that kind of energy, hit that like button and subscribe. We cover the stories that actually matter.